Good morning.
Good morning.
We have now entered into the ordinary times in the life of the church. You see, the church is divided into these segments, and we've experienced the Advent season. Then we experienced the Christmas tide. So in the Advent, we were waiting in anticipation for a child. And in Christmas, we welcomed this child, and then we went through the Epiphany of the wise men, followed by the 40 days of Lent, the 50 days of Easter. We had Pentecost, and I'm sure our Ken Young explained to you last week the Trinity. And now we enter into what the church calls common times, ordinary times, the ordinary life of Jesus Christ. And as we move through this ordinary times, I thought to myself, well, in ordinary times, extraordinary things happen, right? And so I thought to myself, no, maybe I should challenge myself, and maybe I should challenge us to look at these ordinary times and look over the ordinariness of our own lives to find extraordinary moments where we see God working in our lives. And so we're going to be traveling into the Gospel of Luke. And we'll be with Luke at least until sometime before the end of the summertime. And so I wanted to challenge myself. And let me explain what I mean by that. I like to watch The Mission or listen to The Mission. And does anybody know what The Mission is? 570 AM, The Mission. It's a Christian radio station, and I listen to it in the morning. And they have all kinds of preachers on there, mainly male preachers, because that's the way they believe. And they have Bernard from down in Brooklyn. They have the other one here at Greater Allen, maybe. But they got him. And they have some other person in Illinois, and they have Focus on the Family. Focus on the Family is one of my favorite ones. And then they also have Chuck Swindoll. And Chuck Swindoll is considered one of the, our modern great preachers. And he always has a series. He always has a sermon series. And sometimes those sermon series last for an entire month. And I'm always amazed at the fact that he's carried out the theme from text to text to text in a sermon series. And so I said, well, let me challenge myself. We're going to be in the book, the Gospel of Luke anyway. And so we're in this ordinary time. And so let us look at Luke in depth. And so the title of my sermon series is going to focus on the Luke, but the title of my sermon series is Ordinary Times and Extraordinary Moments of Life. And so we're going to be traveling in the book of Luke. And we're going to start at the 7th chapter, as you see in today's gospel. But before we get to the 7th chapter, let's look at how Luke begins. Now, I asked this at 8 o'clock and I didn't get an answer. So I'm hoping at the 11 o'clock, someone here will be able to answer this question. Who was the Gospel of Luke written for? Somebody said it. Theophilus. Yes, the book of Luke was written for a specific person. Unlike all the other books in the Bible, this one actually was entitled and for a specific person. And the reason for that was because there were many Gospels out there. As we heard from Paul, there were many Gospels and people were speaking many things, but there wasn't any orderly account of the life of Jesus Christ. And so the writer of Luke wanted to make sure that Theophilus had an orderly account of Christ's life. And so he says, I'm going to give you this account so that you know who Jesus was and who Jesus is and why he's important to us. So if you don't believe me that it says Theophilus, make sure you go Luke chapter 1, the first 2 verses, say it loud and clear. All right? And by the way, if you want to bring your Bible, I know something, we Episcopalians, we don't bring Bibles to church. But we read enough Bible. All right? We read 2 Old Testaments. We get 2 New Testaments. So I always say, you can't say that we don't read Scripture in church. But you can bring your Bible, because maybe one day I'll point it out and say, hey, turn to page, or not page, but chapter so-and-so, and you don't want to, and I give you permission to use your phone only for the Bible. But in Luke chapter 1, we get the ordinary people of Zechariah and his wife, right? This is an ordinary couple who have been deemed righteous by their society and their people around them, and the one thing they lack is what? A child, right? They're in their old age. Don't know what old age is for the New Testament, but they're in their old age and they have yet to have a child. And so even though the people think that they are a righteous and holy couple, they still think that there's something wrong, something amiss. And it's funny because I was saying earlier that, in today's society, even though we see couples together, there's something amiss when we see a couple that doesn't have children. We still have that tinge of, because we're so focused on what the gospel says, what Genesis says, go forth and procreate. But I always say, I've seen many couples who don't have children but have a lot of children around them. So I always say we're always parents, no matter whether we birth somebody or not. There's always someone we can care for. But these 2 are in there and they're ordinary people and something extraordinary is about to happen to them. God grants them their prayers finally after all these years and gives them a son. But he gives them a son with a purpose. A son who's to prepare the way for the one who is to come. Again, ordinary people given an extraordinary task. And then from there we see an ordinary young girl, a virgin, given the most important role that any woman can have, which is the birth of Jesus Christ. Now, let me ask you ladies, what if God said that to you? You're going to bear my son, right? And you would look at yourself, and you know yourself, and you would ask yourself, am I worthy of this? Right? But Mary is given this extremely important task, an ordinary woman, an ordinary girl given an extraordinary task to do in life. Out of common people, God continues to call to do the work of God on this earth. And though the church says we are entering into this ordinary time, it is in the ordinary time of our lives that God acts and asks us to step out on faith to do extraordinary things. And so we move from that chapter and Christ is born and he's presented at the temple and at the synagogue, I should say. And, we have the song of Simeon who gives praise and honor to him. And we move from there. And next time we see Jesus, he's 12 years old in the temple. He's listening and he's teaching at 12 years old. An extraordinary moment. How many of us would truly sit down and really be taught by a 12-year-old as grown adults? Not many of us. Some of us. Some of us would probably look like, who do you think you are? Right? But Jesus is there in the midst of this festival and teaching. And so much so that his parents leave and totally forget about him and then remember a day later, where's our son? The other day I was at I was at a service. I was at a funeral service. And I saw this lady with her child and she had a leash on him. It's always interesting, the things that people do. I was like, I wonder if my mom ever had a leash on me. But they missed their son for a day. And they went back And they said to Jesus, "Why have you done this to us? We've been looking for you all over the place." And Jesus said, "Why are you looking for me? Don't you know I would be in my Father's house?" In that moment, he's teaching us something. We go all over the world looking for God, forgetting the one place that we will find him is in his house. A little ordinary moment of time and an extraordinary message for all of us this day. And the next time we see him, we don't see him until he's 30. So Lord knows what he's done in between 12 and 30. Right? And I always say we know what we did between 12 and 30. And we just hope that Jesus was better than us. But between that, we get Jesus, we come to John in the wilderness, and John is calling people out to come and repent and to change their ways and to prepare for the one who is coming. And the people there are so waiting, so expecting something that they say to John, "Are you the one? Because you're giving us the message that we need and we want and we desire in our lives. So are you the one?" And John says, "No, not me. But there is one to come." And Jesus comes and he's baptized, and God says, "This is my son with whom I am well pleased." And with that, he enters into the wilderness. And we know that we shared the wilderness experience with Jesus during the Lenten season. That 40 days where he is tempted by the devil to represent the temptations we face each and every day of our own lives. There's not one day that doesn't go by that we're not tempted in some way, shape, or form. And sometimes we succeed and sometimes, right? But Jesus came that we would be able to seek forgiveness in those moments. And so from that moment on, Jesus then proceeds to what the church calls this common time. He enters into his true ministry for the next 3 years of his life. And so when he comes from the wilderness, he enters in, he starts healing people, he starts teaching people, then he starts calling on his disciples, and then he goes back and gives the Beatitudes and tells us how we ought to live our lives and what we shouldn't do with our lives. We're blessed if we do this, but woe to us if we do that. And now we come to this centurion moment. Now, what's significant about Jesus that in this moment is that fact that it's not that he heals the centurion's servant. It's the centurion himself. Now, you got to note that a centurion is a Roman soldier. He's not a Jew. He follows the laws of Rome. He has under his authority other soldiers. He's in charge of this area of Capernaum. He's not the common Roman soldier because he has fallen in love with this Jewish community. So much so that he built them a synagogue, something unheard of during that time. An ordinary soldier doing yet again an extraordinary thing. And so the centurion is so devoted to this Jewish community that even his slave is important. We know that most times their master-slave relationship is not really that strong, right? We know that most oftentimes a slave comes and a slave goes and I just get another slave, right? I remember Father Williams at St. Augustine's used to say, "You know, Kassinda, priests come and priests go in churches. We die today, they look at us, they bury us, and then they keep on moving and say, who's going to be our next priest? Priests come and priests go." And I used to say to them, "Father, you know, they will love us for a moment. They'll miss us. Don't say it like that. They'll miss us for a moment or two, and then they'll move on." But usually, masters move on from slave to slave. They don't care so much as this centurion did. He cared so much that he told his Jewish people, "Go and call Jesus." A non-Jew who Jesus didn't come to talk to, telling the Jewish people, "Go and call that Jewish guy over there." A non-believer somehow believing in Jesus. Is that not an extraordinary moment? And so they call on Jesus. Now, it's interesting to know, up until this time, Jesus has been teaching, right? So there was a point where, a series where he was healing, but in chapter 5 and 6, he's just teaching people. He's teaching the people of his hometown. So now he's got this newfound knowledge, and he goes back home where he was raised, and he's teaching in their synagogues, and he's talking about the scriptures have now been fulfilled in your hearing, and here I am, this is me, that the scriptures are talking about. And what do? They look at him and say, is that not Joseph's son? Who's this guy? Right? Our children are going off to college at the end of the summer. And they're going to go and find this newfound knowledge. And they're going to come back and they're going to want to teach and let you know what they've learned. I hope we don't receive them like the people did in Nazareth, asking the question, aren't you Corey and a nephew there? Why are you trying to teach me something? Right? But the people couldn't fathom that this child that they had watched and raised could grow so much in knowledge that he would come back and teach them something. And so he was rejected. They were ready to throw him off the hill, but he moved on. And then he found his disciples. And again he's teaching. And then just before this, the Pharisees are they're looking for things to catch him. So even earlier on in his ministry, the Pharisees are looking to catch him because they know something is different about this Jesus. He's not like one of us. He's not speaking and teaching in the ways that we are accustomed to. He's reaching out to people who we've already deemed not worthy. He's reaching out to sinners and talking to sinners and eating with sinners and talking to fishermen and talking to tax collectors. So they're ready and itching to get Jesus. And these are Jews now. These are the Jewish people that Jesus came to speak to. And yet, in the next section, in chapter 7, we begin with a non-believer seeking Jesus for healing. Very interesting and very fascinating if you think about the whole scenario. And so the centurion calls on Jesus, and the Jews go out to defend this centurion. This centurion must have been amazing because most oftentimes the Jewish people are complaining about Roman occupancy. Yet they are going to bat for Jesus. This guy is worthy. How do you deem someone worthy in your own life? How do you deem another human being worthy? What are those qualities that you yourself are looking for? This man had it. And the Jews went out there, and they went and they talked to Jesus and said, he is worthy. And Jesus must have thought to himself, what kind of Roman is this? I must go see for myself. And he goes with them. And the Roman is so in touch and so believes in the power of Jesus that he says, stop, hold on, I am not worthy, but all you have to do is say the words, and I know my servant will be healed. Is that not amazing faith? Yes. That you don't even need Jesus to touch you, it just needs to say the word, and you know in your heart that things will be all right. That is the extraordinary moment in this story. That faith is so strong that you believe even if Jesus doesn't touch you. You know, as long as you ask it, it will be fulfilled. Amazing, huh? And this all from a non-Jew, and probably an unbeliever in their own eyes. And think about it. Think about the people who have bestowed wisdom on you that you know aren't Christians, who have given you nuggets, pockets of wisdom, who have said the right words at the right time just when you need it. Can you imagine if the church was filled with people who believed like this guy did? Could you imagine what we could accomplish with that type of faith? Some people are laughing. Is it because we know that there are people in church that don't believe? Right? Or whose faith is like, okay, I'll believe it when I see it. When I feel it. Right? We have a lot of Thomases out there. But in this moment, God is saying, believe me and trust in me, even if you don't see it. Believe that I will be the God in your life, even if you don't understand it. You know, we have in the Old Testament and both in the New Testament this question to choose your God. Right? Elijah says, choose your God. Is it going to be God or is it going to be Baal? Which one is it going to be? Paul says, look, I'm not following the gospel of human beings. I'm following the gospel of God. Oftentimes our faith is, and our questioning of faith is wrapped up in that who are we following situation. Because sometimes we lean on our own understanding. We feel like, I've got it. I don't need help. Thank you very much, but I know which way I'm going. And then when we get there, we realize, I don't have it. We realize, oh my gosh, I need help. But I have pushed people away because I'm leaning on my own faith in myself and not the faith in God, who I say, I am so unworthy. Just say it. You don't even need to bring free presents. Just say it and I know all will be well. The centurion is teaching us about faith in this moment. And we can learn so much from people whom we deem unworthy, or who might believe to say, you're not a believer because you don't go to church every Sunday like me. Right? But God says, lean not onto your own understanding. Choose who you're going to serve this day. Is it going to be me or is it going to be you? Because it can't be both. And when you know from experience that when you lean on yourself, things don't always go right. So why don't you just step out on faith and let God take care of it? Amen. Just know that he'll take care of it on his own time. You can't rush God. The more you rush God, the slower he moves, it seems to me. Right? It took 6 days, so they say. But I'll just say, maybe a day meant a lifetime for us, but a blink of an eye for God. But whatever it is, he always takes his time to do things, to make sure that we are ready, that we are prepared. And it's in the ordinary busyness of our lives that extraordinary things happen, and our prayers are answered, and the healing that we've been seeking for years have all of a sudden taken place. And do you have the opportunity, or do you recognize in that moment that something extraordinary has happened to you? Do you recognize and see it like the centurion who believed, and his belief allowed for his servant to be healed? Because it doesn't say that Jesus ever made it to that place, right? They just went back, and there he was, up and about. Near death, almost dead. Now he's up and walking and doing what he ought to be doing in life. The prayer is, yes, Lord, I believe, right? But help my unbelief. And that's there that God calls us today. To trust him. To believe in him. To look at your life and know that he journeys with you each and every day. That you don't have to go searching far for him. Because he's right there. He's right with you. Do you believe this day? And if you don't, I do pray that God helps you in your unbelief. Amen. Amen.